Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. My name is Ben Gabriel. Welcome to our collective webinar here. Today's topic is Team of Three Fundamentals. So with me is Amy McCarty. Amy, how are you?
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben. Glad to be here.
Glad you're here. Folks are, the way Zoom works, everybody, and lots of folks probably use Zoom out there, but with a webinar, you're like in the waiting room area, and then we start the webinar, and then people filter in, and we can see the number of attendees come up, so I can see folks kind of coming into the session right now. So it happens, I guess, semi-gradually. Anyway, so we have 1 hour together, and we're going to be talking about the team of three. So I want to go through some of the just important, the logistical CPE information fairly quickly so we can get moving with things. So on the screen here, and again, lots of folks will be familiar with this if you've taken any of our webinars before or other webinars, but the session's good for 1 hour of CPE. I'm going to drop a couple handouts into the chat window momentarily. So I'll do that in just a minute or two. So you can pull down both of those and we'll talk about one of them specifically, a time or two. You have to answer 3 out of the 4 polls. I'll tell you up front, 2 of them are quizzes. So there are right answers to them. But you do have to answer at least 3 out of the 4 of those to be eligible for CP, as well as be in the session for at least 50 minutes, 50. If you have questions, you can use the chat panel or the QA panel. Those are both part of Zoom. And then when you close out of the webinar, like we always do, we pop up that survey on the screen so you can give us any feedback, things like that. So those are the kind of the basics. Learning objectives for today, a couple of them, after you leave, or hopefully as you're going here, you'll be able to list the roles and responsibilities of each member of the team of three. And then list 3 things that you can do to get started implementing the team of 3 if you're looking to get started, or maybe you're somewhere on that pathway already. I don't know. One very important resource, and now let me just take the time to do that, Amy. I'm going to go in and grab it, everybody. So there's going to be a couple resources coming your way in the chat panel. One is a PDF of the slide presentation. It's called Team of Three Fundamentals. And the other one coming momentarily is called Team of Three Revenue Carry. So 2 files that I've just dropped into the chat panel. We'll see them again, but this is the Team of Three Revenue Carry. It's up on your screen right now. You can download it out of the Zoom chat. We will come back to this, but this is a really good document, really good resource that looks at things with some important metrics on it, like the amount of revenue potentially that a pod, and we'll talk about a pod as we go here, could carry, billable production percentage target for different roles, different team members, number of clients. And we know that clients certainly vary in the amount of time they may take and work that may be required for them, but giving a range there, but approximate number of clients that a team member could work with and support. So this is all framed around what we would call a full pod of people. And you can see a full pod, or hopefully you can see a full pod. I know there's an oval on there. That's the team of 3. But a full pod is 7 people, a client CFO, 2 client controllers, and 4 client service managers or CSM. So you can pull that document down. We'll actually reference a little bit later. Amy, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a good document, just visual.
Okay, awesome. So before we go any further, I'll spend 30 seconds here. At Collective, we are really explicitly calling this time of year improvement season. We've been doing it now for, since after tax season and everything. We started talking about it, I would say, in earnest or explicitly back at our Recharge conference at the beginning of May with a lot of our members and everything. And you may think about it this way yourself already, but we're really thinking about this time of year from post April 15th-ish, that time, to the fall, around time for extension season. We're thinking about that as improvement season. So if you're considering or working on changes at your firm or improvements, you're likely somewhere on this continuum already. Maybe you're a little bit closer to the beginning, maybe you're a little bit further along, but you're likely somewhere on this continuum already. And part of that may be thinking about the team of 3. So Amy, here's our agenda. Do you want to just talk us through it real quick, what we're going to hit?
Yeah, of course. So, this is the fundamentals. So, what is it? Make sure we're all on the same page. Why consider this? When does it make sense to start thinking about the way you structure your team and maybe doing it differently? Where you'll notice impact? When is a good time to implement this? And then how? So we'll cover everything that you need to know as you're thinking through what could this look like inside of your firm. And then if your questions come up as we're going through, please feel free to send those through. We'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, what, why, where, when, how. I think we've got all those big words accounted for in here. We'll also talk a few different times a little bit about the evolution of the DBA firm and give some history of that firm and their journey and how they've evolved to where they are now and continue to evolve, so that will also be part of our story here, also part of our webinar today too. So let's start, Amy, with I guess let's just start with what is the team of three. So I'll define it, Amy, and then I'll just give you an opportunity to maybe add a little bit more color, knowing that we're going to go further into the details until give lots of context as we go here. But let's start here. The team of three is a structure for accounting firms in which three team members care for each of their CAS clients or care for each CAS client. It does allow teams to provide really high value year-round accounting and advisory services without mandatory overtime. So I think putting those two check marks or those two bullets together, first, it's a structure for firms where three team members are caring for a CAS client. And then really the result of that, and certainly the goal of that, and certainly some results that we've seen in DBA scene is teams are working with their clients year round, doing the work that they do, caring for their clients, doing their accounting work, providing their advice without mandatory overtime, which I think is an important thing to say. So, Amy, any additional color? There may be a lot, and we're going further into the details. Anything you want to say on what the team of three is?
I'll just define for everyone the CAS. What's a CAS client, right? So a CAS client is a client in which we are providing monthly services. In DBA's world, that means that we are doing monthly accounting, payroll, sales tax, also doing tax returns, tax projections, tax planning, and then business advisory is kind of all that is encompassed in that. And so the team approach allows for that client to receive all of that with a team of three, right? And so we have reduced silos inside of the firm by structuring it that way. So, and we'll dig more into what is everybody doing and how does that flow, but yeah.
Yeah, and it won't take long to do that. So, Amy, I heard you just describe some of the services that team members and that DBA provides to their client. Told you we wouldn't have to wait too long there. So, next thing we're talking about, so we've defined what the team of three is, which hopefully makes sense to so far. A team of three team members at the firm caring for and supporting that client. Now, if we go further, here are the different team members and their roles. So we have a client service manager, we have a client controller, and we have a client CFO. That is the team of three. Those are the roles and of the three people in the team of three. The client service manager, which we'll probably from here on out, we'll kind of call that CSM, abbreviate that a little bit, call it CSM. With the CSM, their responsibilities, for their clients and on the team, there are bookkeeping, reconciliations, payroll, and sales tax. For the client controller, their responsibilities, reviewing financial statements for the client, tax projections. Amy was talking about some of these services obviously already. Tax projections, tax preparation, tax planning. And then last but not least, of course, the client CFO. Business strategy, accountability with that client, profit maximization, and then supporting and helping the CSM and the controller. So CSM, client controller, client CFO, And you can definitely see that each person has their set, defined, regular responsibilities. Those are the team of three roles and the team of three responsibilities. Amy, what kind of color or detail would you like to add?
So what I'd like to add here is that um, just another way to think about this, or how we've labeled them, right, to help this make sense, not only to internally for the team, but also externally as we're talking to clients or prospects about the team approach that we take in order to service them. So the client service manager, CSM, is present. We're going past, present, future here. Okay. So the client service manager focuses on the present. They're doing the day to day, right? They're keeping the books clean, they're keeping them up to date. And we all know that if we have clean books, it is much easier in order to service that client in every other area, in order to be able to make tax as efficient as possible, and in order to provide a higher level of advice that is relevant to what's happening. So, client service manager is dealing with the present. The client controller is dealing with the past. They are all things tax, with some tax projections in there. So there is some future planning, but we're using past information in order to do that. And then the client CFO is the future. Where is the client trying to take their business? And the client CFO is really helping to guide them and support them in the goals that they have for their own business. So that's kind of a little bit more color to help as you think about these roles. Um, they each person that sits in each one of these roles are supporting each other. So, and that's one of the things, if you have downloaded that T3 revenue carry PDF that been put through the chat, it will show like what is the percentage billable, our production percentage, right, that each role fills. And you'll notice, and I think we look at this later, so maybe I'm jumping ahead, Ben, but we can talk about it again. It'll be good to repeat.
Set the stage.
Um,
Yeah, all good.
the client service manager, right, they're doing the day-to-day work essentially. And so 85% of their time is spent on client work. The client controller is supporting the client service manager, and also doing all of the tax related and financial statement related work for the client. So they're at 70% billable so that they can have availability to support client service manager. Then you take client CFO is, they are leading both of those other two people, right? So they're at 55% billable, lots of client meetings, strategizing, and helping team to ensure that the path that that client is traveling down is the one that we want them to be traveling down. So just kind of to paint a little bit more of a visual for all of you listening, like they're all not, we're not top heavy with a ton of work on the client CFO. It is more bottom heavy with a lot of leadership on the client CFO and client controller.
Oh, perfect, Amy. Thank you for adding the additional detail, past, present, future, and then we will come back to some of those metrics that you talked about here a little later. So a little foreshadowing. Awesome. Okay, so let's go into our first poll, everybody, which is actually going to be a quiz. So let me bring that up. So it's actually a quiz, which I know everybody loves, but which team member is responsible for which team of three team member handles financial statements and tax preparation for their clients? Um, so we've got folks answering that, and thank you for that. So this is poll number or quiz number, really, they're all the same thing. Poll 1 of 4, everybody. And I can see folks voting now.
What do they get if they get it wrong? Are we going to give out a grade at the end of this webinar?
This webinar is being taken pass fail, Amy.
Okay. We grade
Oh,
on a curve. We're great on a curve now.
if you participate, you pass. So, okay, I'm going to end the poll up, everybody. Dive across that desk. Please make a selection. I'll close it up here right now. And here are the results. So in our team of three, the client controller has those primary responsibilities. So most folks answered there. Um, that is where we land. Those are some of the core responsibilities for the client controller here. So I'm gonna stop sharing that. And Amy, we're gonna go ahead and move on. So we talked about what the team of three is, team of three members supporting the client with three different roles, CSM, client controller, and client CFO. Talked a little bit about some of their specific responsibilities, the work they're doing day in, day out. You talked a little bit about serving the client past, present, and future. So why consider team of three? That's the next area that we have to talk about. So this is where, this guy obviously doesn't really know how to use sticky notes here. But I talked beginning or mentioned at the beginning wanting to give some of the story and evolution of the DBA firm, which really, brings us up to today. And certainly, of course, DBA and all firms will continue to evolve and change and make updates and things like that. Amy, can you give us just a little bit of a history of the firm? I think, we've done this session before, maybe gone back to 2017. We could go back a little further potentially, but just 2017. What did work weeks look like? Where was the team located? How might things have been different, let's say, if we go back several years at this point?
Yeah, I think, so 2017 is a good year that just from a painting the visual of what it looks like inside of Dillon Business Advisors, because that was the most number of clients. I think it was over 2,000 annual clients. Multiple service lines existed inside of the firm. So there was still some audit work that was being done. The team was working 80-hour work weeks. Being at home as an owner was a challenge. And so many of you listening can likely relate, right? It's usually some point we have to get to, which is our breaking point, and realizing that this is not what we want anymore. This is not the path that we want to continue down. And that's where DBA was. There were too many different offerings available to clients. There were silos happening inside of the firm on who was doing the work. Were they doing the same work every year? Was it rotating through whoever had availability in order to pick up that work and get it done? And so it was a lot of stress and a lot of burnout was happening back in I guess it's like 8 years ago. And that was really the tipping point, was that, okay, can't continue this, things need to change. And so that is when the focus started to shift to what are the services that we are providing and how is the team going to provide those services? And it's really those two big things that start the transition to, okay, how do we structure the work that we're doing differently? Well, our team of three approach that DBA has been using, which all of you have a team structure in place, right? It's just how do you feel about the current team structure that you have? And so the intentionality that happened inside of DBA what was only possible because the services that were being sold allowed for a team of three approach. And I think that's an important consideration, right? If we were still offering audit services, well, then that department's going to look different than a CAS department and a tax department, right? And so we're structuring teams in each department slightly different. Whereas the approach here is, look, we know what we want to be doing for clients, which is our CAS offering. And so if we focus primarily on that, and we're happy to do tax as it relates to CAS clients that need tax work, then we can work through a structure that allows this cohesive nature.
8 years ago was a different time at the firm, right, Amy?
Mhm.
Which, a lot of folks may say it was a different time, but the firm had many, many, many. You said over 2,000 clients. You know, into lots of income tax returns, lots of additional hours. There was overtime. Silos were created inside of the firm. It was just a place there where obviously things were that way, and that created a series of challenges. And you just told the story a little bit, but that created a series of challenges. And we'll hit these individually, but capacity, communication, client expectations and client service, and also pricing. So let's kind of go back a little bit and talk about some of these challenges. And we're in the why consider team of three section here, and we considered, or we thought about it, or DBA began that evolution at some point, and we'll look at a timeline there in an attempt, to address the challenges at their firm. And maybe a lot of people can resonate with some of these
Mhm.
same challenges that we all may have. So, with capacity, Amy, I heard you talk about over 2,000 clients. I also heard you talk about 80-hour work week. So, fair to say that capacity was a challenge or became a challenge?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with as many annual tax clients that existed, it was mm, very unlikely that we were hitting deadlines of getting books closed for accounting clients within an acceptable time frame, right? Like our time frame would be that we would want to be able to issue financial statements by the 15th of the month. And so, with that many tax clients, the bookkeeping accounting responsibilities weren't happening. They were getting set off to the side, right? We were 3 months behind on clients, 4 months behind, as everyone kind of shifted priorities to try to get tax work out. And then, after tax deadlines, shifting back to trying to clean up months of bookkeeping and accounting work, right? And so, we ran into that. Um, Internal communication, because teams working in silos, everyone was in office, right? There was not remote work was not really happening back in 2017 when that we hit the breaking point. But even with everyone in the office, silos being created on just trying to get work done, not talking to someone who had done the accounting work for the client and then had been able to like share with the person doing the tax return on what they needed to know. Like those communications weren't happening. So then a tax return would get prepared, but the information wasn't shared. And then hopefully that got caught in review so that it could get updated if there was something that was missing and not communicated internally before it went out to the client, right? And so that then affects client expectations and service. If we can't even communicate internally about that client and they're catching it on their end, which is something that they've already communicated to somebody inside of the firm. I'm sure that some of these stories you can relate to, right? Those of you listening, but yeah, all of that were the challenges that DBA saw.
Yeah, yes. And then, so, and these challenges, things are usually related to each other, right? One challenge affects another challenge, or creates another challenge, or makes another challenge more challenging. But just client expectations and service, Amy, like for clients, did they, and maybe this still holds true sometimes, but certainly I think the goal is to address that challenge. Clients didn't know who necessarily to contact, and who to ask for, and if they had a question, they weren't sure who to ask for or who to contact. So that created some confusion, right? And that
Mhm.
certainly maybe didn't lead to meeting client expectations, and may have hindered service. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, for sure. You know who clients contact if they don't know who else to contact is they contact the owner. So Marcus in this case, right, was having to field a lot of client questions because they clients didn't know that they should reach out to somebody else.
Yeah, so we already talked about the team of three, and we're going to come back and hit that again, of course. But with clients learning, there's certainly an evolution here with the firm as clients may learn. Oh, I have a new person that's working with me, and here's what he or she does. And actually, I have three people that I'm working with, and here's what they all do. The clients begin to learn, right? Oh, okay, this person does this person does that, this person does that. If I have a question about this, I know who to reach out to. So we're streamlining things for the client. We're just giving the client a better experience. They can build relationships with people at the firm, build relationships with people at the firm that know them, work on their account, work on their business. So meeting client expectations, improving service, ultimately improving external communication with clients too. So the last challenge we have on here is pricing, Amy. Can you talk a little bit about you know, how we can improve pricing and how the firm can improve the pricing that they're offering out to new clients?
So pricing's always a challenge. It's an art form. We've we've said that before, right? And those of you that are responsible for pricing, you know that. I think the big thing here is to charge what is necessary in order to allow a team to service the client. So like the challenge here, where the pricing challenge was at that point was that it was too low. Um, and so sure, you have high realizations on tax work, but tax work comes with peaks and valleys in the amount of work that you need to get done in a short amount of time. And so how do we spread that out throughout the year? Well, we make sure that the client's books are clean, right? And so, but in order to price that appropriately, you need to factor in that it is a team approach to that monthly fee amount that you are charging. And also then being able to create the capacity so that team can get that monthly work done even during tax season is ultimately the goal, that we want to arrive at, and where DBA is at today, but had a lot of work ahead of it back in 2017 to get there.
So if I can summarize, Amy, if we're going to move to a team of three approach and a team of three model, our clients need to be priced appropriately to allow for that. Is that fair?
Yes, that is 100% accurate.
Um, great. Okay, let's do poll number 2 right now. And Rachel sent out a message to everybody through the chat for a question that came through. So Rachel is behind the scenes and Christine is behind the scenes too. So thank you to both of you for that. I'm going to put the challenges up of the challenges we discussed. And you've got to pick one. Um, you got to pick one. What would you say is your biggest challenge? If it is something else, I guess you got to pick one answer. If it's something else, which I totally get, let us know in the chat if you pick something else, just so it's always helpful for us to know. But people are answering this poll. This is poll question number 2. All right, I'll leave the poll up for just a little bit longer, everybody. So if you're making a choice or if you've yet to make a choice, please go ahead and do it.
The question that came through, because I think everyone saw the answer, but maybe not the question. It was just if the controllers, are they licensed and do they sign returns? So most of the controllers are either EAs or CPAs, right? Although that's a preferred requirement on the controller, it's not a required requirement, although it is ideal for sure.
Thanks, Amy. So biggest challenge, capacity, internal communication and pricing, and meeting client expectation also. And they may all be challenges, but biggest challenges we see capacity in here, and the others obviously there as well. Okay. So let me close that poll. That was 2 out of 4, everyone. There will be 2 more polls. So okay, Amy, we talked about what the team of 3 is. We talked about why consider it. and really we're trying to paint a picture of challenges that we can address through the team of three structure. So just back to where we were a few minutes ago, everybody, these are the same three team roles that we had up again. Just going back and looking at things again, so you're just reminded a little bit about the different roles and the responsibilities. CSM, controller, client, CFO. You can see their responsibilities listed on the screen. Amy, let's zoom out a little bit now then. Let's zoom out a little bit. So we have the team of three, and this is, if you pull down the team of three revenue carry document, and we're going to look at that again in a minute, but this is the same diagram or graphic that's on the team of three revenue carry, T3 revenue carry document. This is the team of three inside what we would call a pod structure or a full pod. And there are, if you count the people, there are 7 people in a full pod. There's a client CFO that you can see, 2 client controllers in the pod, and then 4 CSMs, the client service managers. So you can see that you really, if you draw an oval, which we'll show in a second, there's a team of 3 going down the left side. There's also a team of 3 going down the right side, and technically there's a couple teams of 3, which is groups of 3 people with 1 client CFO, 1 client controller, 1 CSM in each of those teams of 3. So this is what we call a full pod. Amy, we'll go back to the team of 3 revenue carry document in a second and revisit some of the metrics that you were sharing. Any additional color to share here on the pod structure?
Yeah, so the idea here is there's 4 teams of 3 inside of this particular pod that we're displaying on the screen. But if a CSM is handling 20 clients, let's just say, so then 2 CSMs under a client controller, that means that client controller is responsible for 40 clients. And then if we think of the client CFO, they're responsible for 80 clients, is how we would break that down. But one thing I wanted to add back on the previous slide, Ben, where we just revisited what the roles are, capacity is everyone's number one. So many of you chose that. Well, it's hard. It's hard to fix capacity when everybody can do everything and they're doing everything, right? And so where we start to gain some capacity availability is where we start to define, okay, this is what you will focus on. This role will focus on this. So CSMs will focus on bookkeeping, reconciliations, payroll, and sales tax. Controllers will not do those things. They will review those things and then work on tax work. And client CFOs, even though they could do those things, they will not. And they will focus on business strategy, accountability for the team, leading the team, right? And helping that business owner maximize on their goals. So just really defining who is responsible for what creates a significant amount of efficiency inside of firms, because it is easier to stay focused if you have defined what you're doing. If you can do it all and you are doing it all, then it is very hard to get into a very efficient rhythm because you're jumping, right? And every time you jump to something different, then it just takes a little bit of time to get up to speed on that. And then as soon as you get up to speed, you're jumping to something else. So
Makes a ton of sense, Amy. Thanks for the additional color there. Having that focus helps with capacity. So here's the pod structure. Let's go forward again to, or not again, but seeing it again from the beginning here. This is the same screenshot. This is actually, remember, you can download this out of the chat. Same screenshot that we saw at the very beginning. We call this the team of 3 revenue carry document. It has the same diagram on it that we saw momentarily ago. Same team of 3 pod structure with client CFO, 2 client controllers, and 4 CSMs. And then we've got some key metrics on here: client CFO, client controller, CSM, with some goals that help give you hopefully some goals or context around how, billable percentage, for each role that we are going for. That's the goal. Talking a little bit about, number of clients that a particular role can serve, knowing, of course, that that varies. So, Amy, I think it's really good to show this so that people can kind of see, okay, sort of big picture, overall, we're estimating that the revenue carry for for a pod, not just one team of three, but a pod, is 1.5 million per year. Okay, that's not just one team of three, everybody, that's the pod. And inside of that pod, like Amy said, a pod has a total of 7 people, but really, with a CSM, a controller, and a CFO being a team of three, there are 4 different teams of 3 represented here. And so you can see some of the metrics that we are paying attention to when it comes to, ultimately, as we charge clients, how things fit into how salaries and everything all in with a person goes into the billing. And then of the fees that we're collecting from the client and charging the client, what part of that goes to the budget for that particular individual or that particular role. So, Amy, there may be a lot of details to go in here, and what could you highlight for us?
I'll reiterate, what I shared earlier, really with the production percentages, because I think this is a good thing to sit back and think about. Um, what I have seen in a lot of firms is that we are anticipating percentage for a CFO and a controller, right? And so just again, the CSM and the bulk amount of the work we really want happening at the CSM level. They are 85% billable, working on client work 85% of the time, right? The other 15% is internal trainings, vacation time, um, QBO recertification, like all of the things that need to happen. But 85% of their time is on client work. And then that client controller is really supporting CSM, doing all the tax work, but at 70% billable production. And then your client CFO at 55%, right? Like, I think that's a very important thing to sit back and think about. And what does that look like? Because if we are a client CFO and we are full, our plate is full with client work, right? So from a billing standpoint, okay, great. Like, we're billing a ton out at the client CFO level based on bill rates. But where is the leadership and the knowledge sharing and the ability to help other team members learn and grow? And so that piece plays a big part in culture within the firm and the ability for additional team members to be able to step up and grow into other roles. And so that's important, that we can't fill the CFO completely with client billable work, because there's a lot of leadership that needs to happen in order to have a successful team.
Great, Amy. So this is thank you. This is just a valuable resource maybe to help you kind of visualize the big picture, but also some really important details that lead to that big picture. Ultimately, if you have that goal that a pod or this structure could carry that revenue, it's really important that we have some of those metrics to pay attention to and be thinking about. Okay. So Amy, we went back to 2017 a little bit and talked about where the firm was at that time with many, many, many individual tax clients working longer weeks, having some communication challenges with clients, maybe, or meeting some client expectations, having some communication challenges internally. Let's share a little bit of a timeline.
All
You know,
right. So let's say we went back, 2017 was breaking point, and that was when, okay, something needs to change, starting to explore what could change. Still had the audit practice then. So 2020, the audit practice had been sold off, which meant that the team member that was primarily responsible for that audit work also left. So then, okay, we've offloaded a service line. Now let's start to plant seeds with the team about what could something different look like, right? And so mind you, this idea of like limiting the number of overtime hours was something that has been discussed in this industry for a long time, right? But like when you're in it and you're working a ton of overtime, and then to hear this, you're like, nah, I don't really see how that can work. So buy-in wasn't really there in 2020. And then the focus, though, became on selling monthly services to clients. And so I believe that right around 2020, 2021, that the team approach started with a smaller number of CAS clients. There was also incentives back then to grow the monthly recurring CAS clients. And so that incentive was for every new CAS client that came on, right, 1 to 3 months, I think this ranged depending on time, went into a bonus pool. And so again, we just think when you're heavy annual tax work and you got a heavy tax season, but you're also adding new monthly clients, tax season just got a whole heck of a lot crazier because we have to get all this annual work done and we also have to service monthly clients. So started to implement this, started with one leg really. And the way that it really worked is that delegation just started to happen. So what was being done, Mark is sending out financials as the CFO, right? He was sending out the financials. And so what started happening is, okay, well, the controller that was working on clients, he would say, hey, why don't you send out those financials? And just starting to delegate work down in order for team to get comfortable with maybe doing something that they weren't doing before. That's really how it started in 2020 with a smaller number of CAS clients. And then, okay, so we have a team of 3 doing this. It's working, right? Getting more comfortable with defined roles. Like, oh wait, am I doing this as a CSM? Like, am I getting everything ready for the financials? Like, how far am I taking it? Controller, where are you picking up at, right? Like working through that. And then in 2022, rolling that out to the rest of the team and starting to structure, okay, like clients, who's working on which clients. And that was a little bit chaotic in that there were 40 variations of teams of 3. So, you know, a CSM, and they weren't called CSMs at the time, right? So those names also evolved, but like the role in the CSM could be working with, you know, working with all of the controllers that were inside of the firm. And then the controllers could be working with all of the CSMs. There were so many different variations of how people were supporting clients that also was chaotic, in that what we were trying to build is a team approach of servicing a client, but also the efficiency of working together on a team. And so if you're working on 10 different teams, well, you have to, okay, well, on this team, this is how everyone likes to communicate and work. And on this team, well, it's slightly different, right? Like they'd rather have a conversation than a chat message. And so then you have all of these variations that you're trying to manage and monitor, which just doesn't help with efficiency. So then in 23, okay, we have to change this. Let's create more defined pods is really what happened there. Is like, we need to create a pod. And it makes sense for a pod to really have like a primary focus on an industry or two, because that's an easier way to like, okay, if this is the pod that's really focused on dentists and medical, then great. Who's servicing those clients? What shifting do we need to do with our clients in order to get more consistency in each leg? And then if we have our veterinarian pod, right? Now, every pod just can't service one industry. They maybe can, depending on what you do, right? But for us, that was not and still isn't practical because we have clients in different industries. We just have a greater focus in a couple of primary industries, but we have more than just those industries. So that really, like 2023 was really like, okay, we got to fix this. It's too much. It's too chaos. And then 2024 was just another refinement. Like, we need to continue to pare back. So we went from 40 variations of different legs in 22 to like 14 in 23. And then we were like, we can make this even better. And that's all. I mean, you start the ball rolling. So you start thinking about like, what are my roles? Okay. Who's going to do those roles? Okay. What clients are they currently servicing? And now how do we start to shift who's servicing? And the important thing there, and I'm foreshadowing again, Ben, you love it, is when you think about who's working on a client, we try to keep at least one person consistent. Two, if possible, right? So that the client experience, they've gotten comfortable with the team members that they work with. We avoid trying to change all three team members on a client because we can have some chaos and chaoticness internally, but when the client starts to feel it externally is when we really need to pump the brakes and think about what needs to happen. And so then in 25, adding in an additional pod. Right now we have 2 pods. And the images that we've shown here are to help you as you think through what can this structure look like in your firm. Ben and I have talked to many firms who are doing a team of 3 approach, but they're slight variations, right? So if it's just about structuring your team in order to service a client from a team approach, so we don't have silos and client information. And if somebody wants to take a vacation, they can, right? And so any variation of a team of 3 works because we are not an exact pod right now. Like a pod for us is not 4 CSMs. It's actually 2, but we've added a client service manager assistant in, is what we had also done to allow a CSM to delegate down. So I just share that to say this will grow and evolve in your firm based on what works best for you and the team that you have available to you or the technology that you have available to you.
Awesome, Amy. Good story of the evolution, which continues, right? The evolution continues. I'm gonna put our third poll up. I think I saw one question come through the QA. Do you mind glancing at it while I put the third poll up?
Sure. And it looks like Rachel answered it, but it's a good one to address so everyone,
Even
if you
better.
didn't see it, yeah. So if a CFO is only 55% billable, which makes sense, then even on the low end of client count, they can only spend an average of 1 hour per month per client. I have a hard time seeing how they can provide meaningful leadership for the client and pod, especially if they are managing up to 150 clients. Maybe I'm not fully understanding the CFO role. I just have a hard time seeing how they can provide good service to the client and staff with that large of a load. So, and then Rachel answered, and I'll just add a little bit of additional to it, but the CFO relies on the data from the CSM and the controller to advise the client, right? So the work is done. The CFO is reviewing what is already done to see a quick snapshot visual of what's happening with the client. But here's the important piece is they are meeting with most clients once a quarter for 30 to 45 minutes. So in the service offerings that we have for clients at DBA, every package is essentially the same. The only differentiator, the primary differentiator is the meeting frequency with a CFO. So at the lowest level package offering, it's an annual meeting with the CFO. In the middle package, it's a quarterly meeting. And in the top package, it's a monthly meeting with the CFO. So if, when there's three offers available, generally it's said that, right, people gravitate towards the middle offering, which would be true in our case as well here, in that, they want the best, don't want to pay for the best. They want service, but they don't want the lowest one. So, I mean, that's how a CFO is able to manage that many clients, is because the clients are not all monthly clients. That was a
Uh,
good question.
yeah, yeah, great. Thanks, Rachel, and thanks, Amy. You can take a look at, let me share the results on the poll, everybody. In a full pod, how we've designed it, there are four CSMs. A pod may not certainly be entirely full with every role filled, which Amy said as well. So, okay, I'm going to stop sharing. We've got about 10 minutes left, everybody. And so let's kind of head towards the end here. What impacts has DBA seen? And Amy, maybe pick just a couple of them. We'll show some statistics momentarily, but what are some of the impacts? We've talked about capacity. I think we've talked about clarity as well, as it becomes more clear to really people and clients, right? Clarity and communication are probably related. We've hit some of these impacts that are now felt throughout the firm. Amy, can you highlight one or two others? We just have about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I'll highlight a couple. Um, so just from a capacity standpoint, as the migration and the refinement of teams of three happened within DBA, we have seen that we're able to service more clients with less team members than the firm had before. So that was a big aha of like, okay, we've gotten efficient, with team clarity on what are the roles, what are we focused on, where are we spending our time. And so that has definitely helped from a capacity standpoint. I will also say, and this I'm going to share, this is very recent. So we did an acquisition in January of this year, because we're not crazy. And so team came over with this acquisition, and they are now working in a team of three model, which is something new to them. Um, and so just feedback from a culture standpoint, feedback from this individual, she's like, I love working in a team of three. Like, this is great that like I have somebody else who's also working on the same clients, and we're able to have conversations, and it's something that I didn't experience really before. Like, kind of, right? I mean, you're working in a firm and you're talking with others, but this defined team of three is a good feeling. And so that's very recent. And it was good to hear that somebody coming in from the outside and working into a team of three feels like it's a positive experience and can see the benefit from it. So I think that speaks volumes.
That does speak volumes. So, on the previous slide, we saw capacity, efficiency, profitability, client service. So, significant increase in all these numbers are very significant. Increase in efficiency, increase in profitability. And then with client service, that certainly looks very significant. How is the firm measuring client service?
So that one is, we just want to pat ourselves on the back with that one. We send out NPS scores to our clients, right? And they are rating us. Anything less, if a client gives us less than an 8 out of 10, we are reaching out to have a conversation if there's anything that we can do to increase that number, right? So we have received very high scores. If there are any low scores that come in, it is usually a communication breakdown that is easily resolved by having a communication. But the 99% increase in client service would be, we were not sending out NPS surveys, and then we were. And so that's a huge increase.
It is. Yeah, it is always good to ask, right? How are we doing? How can we improve? And most of the time things are going great, clients are happy, but when folks let you know or there's a little bit of a red flag there, it's always good to be as proactive as possible,
Yeah.
and figure it
Yeah.
out. So, Amy, we've got just about 5 minutes left. We want to talk a little when and we want to talk a little how, to send people off. But when to implement, and I think we've talked a little bit about, um, I think we've talked a little bit about these things specifically, but, is your firm operating in silos? Do you feel that? Is there an imbalance in workload where maybe certain team members have a ton of work to do, other team members way less work to do? Is there that imbalance there? Are people working overtime? And is culture suffering? And culture may be one of those things that's hard to define and put a number on or a metric on, but culture is definitely one of those things that everyone has one and it evolves and we want ours to be good. So if you're starting to know these things or have known these things or feeling these things or recognizing these things, it is a good time to consider, that organizational structure that can start to take you down, addressing some of those challenges. Fair, Amy? Anything else to add?
No, that's very fair. If you
Oh,
relate to any of those questions, it's a good time to think about team structure.
okay, so how to get started here, and I have I put just a screenshot up here. This is actually one of the resources that we have inside of our library here, but this is a client intro document. We actually have a Word version that's editable, of course, right? But this is a client intro document. So if we wanted to send the client some information, hey, as we are transitioning your relationship and these folks will be caring for you and this is what they do, it's a really good introductory document for clients. So maybe that helps you to think about here's how I might introduce this to clients with some information about the people at the firm that will be working with them. Maybe they already know one or two or three already and are comfortable and have known them already, but just introducing them or reintroducing them and what they'll be doing. But we've kind of said, hey, as you get started down this path, step one, what does your current organizational structure look like or your current team structure look like? How is the firm organized? What are people doing? What are their responsibilities? We've shown the pod structure org chart. We've talked about the roles and responsibilities for each member of the team. So can do you move things around a little bit on that org chart? Where do people sit? And then certainly roles and responsibilities. We want them to be as clear and as documented as possible. So analyze current org structure. If you need to move things around, step two, that's designing that new org chart if people are going to move around, maybe in a team of three structure, and then making sure that for each role, roles and responsibilities are defined and clear. So Amy, what would you like to add, if anything?
I think that's a really good getting started point, right? Really thinking through the note that it doesn't all 100% have to be figured out in order to get started. You have to have and create a willingness for team to continue to evolve this with you is something that I want you to make sure you feel good about that, because if we had to have everything all figured out before we rolled out anything new, we would never do anything.
Um, yeah, don't forget to download that team of three revenue carry document from the chat, everyone, if you haven't pulled that down. That certainly gives that bigger picture with key metrics. So, Amy, I want to put up our fourth and final polling question. Are there any chats or QA messages we can hit at the end?
So Brandy was asking about the 99% increase. So it's an NPS, it's the Net Promoter Score survey that we send out to clients. And then Rachel should be able to share a sample of what we send out. It's very, very easy questions. I think it's only 3.
Most folks will probably recognize it because you've probably got one or more, after you've gone somewhere or done something where you get a message that says something like, would you recommend us to, or how likely are you to recommend this to, a friend or something like that? And you can score things from 1 to 10. 10 being certainly what we want. That's like, yes, I'm highly likely to recommend you. One being obviously the other end, things did not go well, not likely to recommend you. That's net promoter score in a nutshell. I'm not a net promoter score expert, and Rachel may know more there certainly. So, do you have a firm organizational chart? I'll leave the poll up or for just 5 more seconds, everybody, and then we'll tie the loop. Okay, let's end it. So things are kind of split along. Some folks, yes, up to date. Some, yes, but we should take a look at it. I get it. And then some no, and some I don't know. So folks kind of spread across the board there. That was our fourth and final polling question, everybody. So as we come to the end, we're kind of coming full circle a little bit for us and for collective. This is improvement season. We've been, really talking about it, and folks have been working on things here as they normally would. But after tax season through into extension season, really leaning into making sure that we identify anything coming out of tax season that we might want to improve, do differently, do better. Maybe we want to have that in place for September, October, and try some things out to see if they work better tax wise. If you meet with leadership at your firm, and that may be just you, that may be you and other key leaders or people at the firm, what other things are you wanting to be working on, rolling those improvements? Maybe it's a software change, something like that. Could be a variety of things, rolling those out to your team. And then obviously, certainly execution, working through it with the team and having some deadlines in place there. So lean into that, lean into this being improvement season. We are certainly trying to do that on our side. And then the last thing I'll leave people with is our next member webinar for our members is on July 16th. It's on tax projections as we work through our summertime. We will announce a new webinar for just the profession or the general public here for July in the relatively near future. So if you're already paying attention, which you are, we greatly appreciate it. Look out for that. We'll probably make that announcement at some point in the near future here. So that's all we have today. Amy, I want to sincerely thank you for all of your insight and expertise. Rachel and Christine behind the scenes, keeping an eye and helping with questions and everything. And especially thanks to all of you for being on today. Have a great rest of your Wednesday and a great rest of the week. We are all set. Our session's over. When you close out, you'll see the survey. If you'd like to give us some feedback, please do so. So thanks, Amy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone.